having a situation where it doesn't matter what gender you are. You should have the same opportunities. You should have the same protections um, uh, in the law. You should be treated the same. That's my goal. And we've moved a long way from that now. We have discrimination in favour of women right throughout big institutions here in Australia, employment, whatever it is, the law. That's that. I think that's incredibly unfair, and I don't want to. I don't think that's a horrible future for young boys, realizing they're growing up in a society that's really hostile to men, and that's what we've achieved now.
Mhm. Okay, so let's sort of parse it all up a little bit, because there's been many people now raising alarm about the fact that men are being left behind. And we can see certain things that are certainly affecting it. For example, the fact that, let's start with education. In education, majority of teachers are female. And in the world where a lot of boys, whether you live in Australia, America, and the UK, the story is the same. A lot of boys are growing up without the fathers in their homes. And they don't really have any sort of father figures at their schools either. So what do we know in terms of boys and men and education?
Well, I mean, I think there's no question this is a disaster for boys to grow up many boys growing up in an entirely female world and not having any opportunities as part of their normal upbringing to learn the particular approach to child rearing that comes from men. I mean, there's been a lot of research on this showing that males and females tend to parent differently and tend to play differently with children and have different ideas about boundaries for children and so on. And I think many of us have examples of that from our own lives. I remember with my kids, you tend to shrink away as a woman when your husband is throwing the babies in the air and roughhousing with them, and that sort of play doesn't. I mean, some women do it, sure, which is fine, great, but it's much more common from males to push the boundaries in terms of boys and girls growing up and learning to take physical risks and learning to know their own strength and learning to when to pull back and when not to do something stupid or not to be aggressive. All of that play is extremely important for boys. And also, and I think that very much extends into the teaching environment too, in terms of the messages the male teachers convey compared to the female teachers. And we see this playing out in so many aspects of our societies, that women's overemphasis on safetyism and risk and so on. I mean, we saw that during COVID, where the whole, demand for wearing masks and so on very much came from women. And, I find myself surrounded by women wearing masks even in their cars and so on. Crazy stuff. And that's very much about, people keeping people safe. And that's much more likely to be a physical a characteristic of women than men. And it's not good for our society to limit the way we bring up our children to simply one means of parenting, one means of teaching. And that's what we're doing now. I mean, I think it's been a disaster in our schools. One of the things I've been really involved in is helping male teachers as they deal with the constant suspicion they face as males. I mean, we've done something absolutely dreadful in creating this impression that all males pose physical and sexual risks to children, which means any male teacher is potentially subject to false allegations. I was talking to a teacher the other day who was teaching a class where there was the really naughty girls, and they told him that they'd managed to get rid of the previous teacher, by systematically teasing him and calling him a pedo, and and then when he threatened to split them up and put one girl at the front of the class, they simply said, if you do that, we will tell them that you were looking at us in a way where they made us feel uncomfortable, and you'll use your job. I mean, girls in that situation are being taught to misuse their power to, set males up that they are annoyed with. If a teacher is in any way strict with them, they can get rid of these guys. And that's what's happening. I mean, it's a real problem in our schools. And I just think teaching is too risky for men now. I mean,
Yeah.
men across the country losing their jobs as teachers.